Hey, this is Carrie from Wrap Your Head Around Silks. This is the Expecting Ariels podcast, now with the Digit Network. Thanks so much for tuning in. I cannot believe this, but this is season 5. So thanks to you. This is a thriving podcast, reaching the corners of the world, all the women out there, and I'm so excited and proud to be with you. If you haven't listened to the Artist Entrepreneur podcast, my new podcast with Noah Dock and Amanda Ritchie, please check it out. It's going to be on this feed on Thursdays. We're 3 artists navigating our businesses. We have so much fun. Please check it out. It'll be in your inbox on Thursdays. And just announced September 26th to the 28th, I'll be at NECCA, the New England Center for Circus Arts, for an 11-hour weekend silks immersion. So it's a retreat-esque without being a full retreat. And I'd love to see you there. It's picturesque Vermont. And I have just a handful of spots left for June 21st through 28th with suite retreats in Oaxaca, Mexico. Roll it out every Sunday and Thursday. I have some different times to accommodate my Pacific people and my East Coast people. My flagship course, Beginner to Intermediate Aerial Silks, online for anybody in the world. And of course, Aero Rehab, which is meant to be the bridge between PT and your favorite aero class. I'm teaching all over the place this year. Austin, Oaxaca, Ohio, and DC this summer. And of course, NECCA in the fall. Let's get started.
My name's Elsie Smith, and I am part of the duo, the identical twin duo of Serenity and Elsie. I got into circus kind of through the back door. I got a chance to try a flying trapeze, and I was 17 when I first got a chance to try that. And then I went back to university. And a friend of mine had a brochure for a summer camp that she was going to be teaching at as a music instructor. And I was flipping through the brochure and I saw that this camp also had circus. And it dawned on me that people got hired to teach circus and could do more of it. At the time, I was not in a position for myself to take the job, but I told Serenity about it, and she got hired to teach circus at this camp, obviously having only been on the flying trapeze a couple of times. And then last minute, I said, what the heck, I think I need to run away and join the circus as well. But it was really, for both of us, just a summer job. Yeah, it was more than a summer job. We never went back. Yeah. So Serenity and I got into circus through teaching at the summer camp and basically absconded from university. The people who were running the circus camp portion of a bigger performing arts camp, it was called Circus of the Kids. And they traveled around the Eastern Seaboard teaching circus to kids at orphanages and community centers and schools. And so I ended up joining them through the rest of the year and teaching flying trapeze, tight wire, trick roller skating, fire eating, duo trapeze, Spanish web. Like, we got a crash course in basic teaching of all of those things. And then we also had an opportunity to get on stage because, you know, if you do trick roller skating, it's a coach performing with a kid, or duo trapeze, you're a coach performing with a kid. So we got basically a little stage time and we got to learn a whole bunch of traditional circus stuff. And Serenity actually got invited to join Ringling Brothers because one of the other coaches that we were working with was going back to Ringling, and they had one of their dancers who also did Spanish web called out just before the tour went out. And she called us, and Serenity happened to be available. And that's how Serenity ended up riding elephants and dancing and doing Spanish web for Ringling Brothers.
Wow.
You may not have noticed, but I didn't start my story with, oh, we did dance or, oh, we did gymnastics as kids. As kids, we grew up in the middle of the woods. We had a log cabin with no running water and electricity. So for fits and giggles, we climbed trees and, you know, built forts in the stream and helped our dad at his sawmill. We were not trained dancers or anything like that. So for Serenity to get hired as a dancer for Ringling, you know, she could count to 8 and she could fake the dance part, but she was really strong and could do Spanish web.
Right.
Yeah. So our careers sort of diverged a little bit at that point in time. I stayed with the teaching side of things, and she was going off with the performing side of things. Eventually, I moved to Northern Ontario, where there was no circus at the time. And I discovered gymnastics, and I actually became a certified gymnastics teacher through the Canadian coaching system. And that training and the way that they broke up the training into technical components and sort of like theory components and then practical components is a big part of what Serenity and I eventually used to inspire us when we created our aerial teacher training program. But before that happened, I ended up moving back to San Francisco, where Serenity lived at the time, where she was performing with the Pickle Family Circus. And after a couple of years in which I was mostly an administrator for the circus school there, we ended up putting an act together and getting hired for some casino contracts and doing a lot of performing together.
And how old were you at that time?
We were 26 at the time. And then through a lot of different processes, ended up being invited to audition for Cirque du Soleil in Montreal because they needed identical twins to do swinging trapeze. At that time, we taught flying trapeze, we taught swinging trapeze, but we were not swinging trapezist and had not done it together. But we did a week-long audition, and at the end of that, they offered us a contract, which was shocking. And later on, I discovered from the coach who was there that they sort of offered the contract to us on a lark. They knew that we were older than they normally hire. We had none of the background and training that they normally hire, but they really needed identical twins to do trapeze. And so the coach said, I'll work with him for a couple months and we'll see what happens. So that's exactly what happened. We moved to Montreal in the middle of the ice storm in 1998.
Wow.
It basically shut down the whole town. There were rolling blackouts for weeks after we moved there. And we learned duo swinging trapeze. And within 6 months, we were headlining the Saltimbanco show that was touring in Asia at the time.
Wow.
Yeah, not the usual progression.
Good gig. You got to travel.
It was. We got to travel it was a 4-year contract. So 3 years of travel plus the training in Montreal. And we got to travel all over Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong. We came back to the States to do Portland and Seattle, and then 14 months in Japan.
Oh my God, how amazing.
Yeah, it was.
Is Japan one of your favorite countries now because of that, I'm assuming?
I think I would say Australia is a little bit more. I'm a nature girl, and the cities in Japan were wearing after a while. There's a lot of noise, like constant noise. But culturally, I mean, there were some amazing things. I mean, I brought a bicycle with me. And so every town that I lived in, I was biking around. And in Japan, you can put the bike on the train and be off in the middle of nowhere. It was all
it's a whole lifestyle.
Amazing. It's a whole lifestyle. Yep. Yeah. So we did that for 4 years.
Okay, hold on, pause. I have like a million questions already. So we're going to just like bookmark where you were. Don't forget what you were about to say. So what was that year of training like? Like, can you...
She looks rock punk.
She does look punk.
She looks like rock punk.
Oh, she has yellow shoes on too.
Yeah, she just used the marker to color her hair, and she's now punk.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right, go away. Go play. So what, like, was that training like? Like, how intense was it for you at that time?
Well, I'm going to back up a little bit just to give some background about where Serenity and I were at going into that contract. Serenity had been performing professionally for maybe 4 years with the Pickle Family Circus, with Farfan Productions, with Ringling Brothers. And she had a different training partner, aerial partner, who's Aloysia Gavre, wwho is Cirque School LA.
Oh, yeah, Alicia.
Yeah.
She's in my community up there.
Yeah, so she and Serenity were doing duo trapeze for a while I was doing the teacher track. And then eventually I moved to California. And then Serenity and I put our act together. But she obviously had quite a head start on me. So I had only been performing professionally for less than a year when we got into Cirque du Soleil, if I'm remembering the timeline correctly. So it was very intimidating for me. I mean, intimidating for her as well, but especially intimidating for me because I had a 1 week contract, a couple of spot dates, and then an 8-week contract under my belt when I got hired by Cirque du Soleil. So the whole process of training was new to me, training at that level. Because before I'd been training, 7:30 in the morning, and then I would go to my real job, whereas Serenity would train with me at 7:30 in the morning and then go to her circus training. So she had that in hand. So when we showed up to Montreal, it was, 5 days a week, several hours a day. It was before the rest of the cast arrived. So we had quite a bit of focus from the trainers. So we did 1 hour of swinging trapeze a day, 1 hour of static trapeze a day. There were dance classes, there's physical theater classes, and then a lot of just conditioning and aerobic work. And after our first presentation, work in progress, Boris, who was the head of the studio at the time, brought us into his office and said, "I did not want you here.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And this is like a delightful human, but he's Russian and scary if you've.
Yeah. And they're just blunt, right?
I love blunt though. He said, "Yeah, I didn't want you here. The director of the show, Andrew Watson, and your coach, Warren Connolly, said that they would see how it went for you all." I don't remember how much else he said about why he didn't want us there, but in my mind, the story was I had no gymnastics background. I was not a trained circus performer, all the different things that we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
But he said, "I've watched you be the first people here every day, and we don't have to babysit you. If we tell you you need to work on your entrance choreography and come up with something creative and show it to us, you do. Basically he said, you get the work done, and it's not a lot of effort for us to make you do the work." And he said, "Congratulations, you guys deserve to be here." So that was
that's
really
amazing.
amazing. And I tell my students that all the time. Is like, sometimes it's not, all the flash and the whiz bang and stuff like that. It's just showing up and doing the work that you're being asked to do. And then people can trust being able to put you in their multi-million-dollar production because they know you're going to show up and they know you're going to travel across the world and you're not going to miss your airplane flight, that you're easy to work with. So we did that from January until May. And then in May, the rest of the cast showed up. And we went from basically, there were maybe 12 people training at the studio to hundreds of people training at the studio because they were also creating La Nuba and O at the same time. So they basically...
Oh, what a time to be at Cirque.
It was incredible.
Wow.
But they basically said to Serenity and I, "You're doing great. Go train over there, over the foam pit." And we didn't see our coach very much. And, we saw him for the swinging trapeze rehearsal, but for most of the other rehearsal times, we were kind of on our own doing our thing, which was fine for us. We'd been teaching for a long time, so we set up the video and just sort of videotaped ourselves training and fell in the foam pit when it wasn't working. And then by September, the show was together. So from May to September, it was a lot of training with the other folks, putting together the vignettes and the skits and creating the show. It was a lot of work.
Elsie, I love that story. I have a story very similar that I've never told in this podcast. I'm going to do it really quick.
Yay.
So when I first moved to LA in 2000, I signed with this agency who is now the biggest agency, like very well respected in LA for commercial dance. And Lainey Fillick was one of the owners and the person that signs all the dancers. And she came to watch me dance at Edge Performing Arts Center, which is the spot. And I came into the office knowing she was going to sign me. And she sat me down. She said, "You are not here because you're special. I don't want to sign you. But we need your category." I was like, awesome. Awesome, because I moved to LA and I wasn't that good yet. I wasn't that good. But she's like, we need women, your look, all the things. Just do your job.
Yeah. I mean, that's for Serenity and I. It was, we need identical twins who can do trapeze.
And do your job.
Do your job.
And I am not the most talented person that has ever walked through there. And I'm still repped by them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm personal friends with all of them. Same thing.
Yeah. You do the job and you do learn. It's not to say that I don't feel like I became an artist and that I became really, really good at what I do. But when I started, I wasn't. And so, especially when you're starting, you can't ever think I'm all that. You might be all that, but you still have to do the work and show up and be reliable. That is your job when you're starting out.
Yeah, because I've seen tons of talented people, just like talent in their skin. You cannot deny it. And then they kind of mess up with production and they get fired because they don't have time for that, because it's all about money. And for money, you need artists that are going to like do their job, show up and be consistent.
I would say from my experience, it's about community. And then that does come into money. And the community part of it is, if I'm on the road with 30 people, you're that person that when the bus is supposed to leave at 6:00 in the morning and everybody else is on that bus and you can't get yourself out of bed, or you're not responding to the visa questionnaire and they're trying to bring the whole cast to China and you're the one who can't get it done, you're too much work and you're too much, and you're not contributing to the community. And that's what's going to get you not asked back. But if you're the first on the bus, when they ask you to send an email, you send an email, you're early to rehearsals. So there's not some stage manager going, where is that person that I can't start rehearsals without, because they're the base and nobody can do anything without that base. If you're late, you're affecting the cohesiveness of that whole team. And that's what's going to get you not invited back.
I have another story that I'm going to tell right now. It is not the same, but I just want to get a laugh out of you. So I was on tour with Motley Crue in like 2013 or something like that. And that is like rock and roll. And I got hired as a like, not a sub, but filling in for somebody else couldn't do it. And I got on there and I just got completely like all the dudes on the crew. There's so many, there's dozens, right? And like, I got through that without messing with any, but I was so professional. My boundaries were so tight, super tight boundaries. I was professional as I could be. And then I get a call from the director 10 years later. And he's like, because he knows I train aerialists. He's like, we need an aerialist. And I want you to send me a couple people. And I was like, why, by the way, why pray tell are you calling me 10 years later? You've met a lot of people since then. Like dancers and aerialists you needed. He's like, honestly, because you're the only person who never slept with the entire crew.
It is amazing what it is that really get ahead. And a lot of times it is that professionalism that people remember. Yeah.
He's like, I know if you send me a couple people, they'll probably have the professionalism you had.
Yeah, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit.
No, please.
Now I have the New England Center for Circus Arts that my sister and I started, and we have the longest running professional training program in the United States. And we work with, a lot of the Seven Fingers folks were on the Saltimbanco tour with us. We've been friends with them for a long time. We send them a lot of folks. We send AIDA Cruise Lines, a lot of folks. And we get feedback all the time that one of the qualities that they really like about our students is that they understand that value that they're bringing to the table. It's not just that they can do the splits or they can do the crazy pirouette catch on the rope. It is that they understand the value of being part of a community and showing up. And I think of that as like the circus part of the business. Like the traditional circus part of the business is everybody spliced rope, everybody sets up the net, everybody pounds stakes. And that's part of that quality that we try to instill on our students.
I love this. Okay, so let's go back just a couple feet because you and look at that outfit. That's good. Oh my God, what'd you do to her eyes?
Yes.
Wow, you're really proud of yourself. Good job. Come here. Here. Oh my God. Don't mess with my wires, please. It's put together by Scotch tape. There you go. So because you guys started NECCA and you have Nimble Arts Company, yeah, I feel, you know what I feel like? I feel like everybody in our community has heard of NECCA. I think that is you guys are a mainstay in our... You did eyeshadow. I know, my love. You guys are a mainstay in our community, even just by word of mouth. But I don't know if a lot of people know you. So give us like your perspective on starting all of it, you know, what it was like from, you know, your point of view.
Yeah.
And even now.
I'll go back to where we left off in Japan, which is Trinity and I finishing up our Saltimbanco tour with Cirque du Soleil and deciding that while it was really a great gig, we were ready to sort of branch out and do our own things. And I think we both missed teaching, and obviously we both missed sort of living in one place. And we decided to move back to Vermont. We had grown up in Massachusetts, but our family had moved to Vermont while we were gallivanting around with the circus. So we made Brattleboro, Vermont, our hometown. It was on the train line between Montreal and New York. There's a really close airport. It was a lot cheaper to live than it was in San Francisco, where we had been before. And we started our partnership, which we called Nimble Arts. Our performing act was Gemini Trapeze, but the business was Nimble Arts. And we just started piecing together performing and teaching in our little town. And part of the teaching was developing a teacher training to teach people how to teach aerials. And before we knew it, we had a community of people wanting more circus in Brattleboro. And we had this very lively career teaching all over the world and performing all over the world. We were performing at circus festivals with our own act, doing all the corporate stuff, you know. So eventually it just became something bigger than we had planned. We had teachers who said, "Oh, I want to move to Vermont. Can I teach for you?" And we said, "Well, sure, come move to Vermont." We had this little studio that we were subletting, and we said, "Well, why don't you run a summer camp if you want?" And then before we knew it, we had 6 weeks of summer camp and 3 staff. And it just grew and grew and grew. And eventually we decided to turn Nimble Arts into a not-for-profit that could be basically owned by the community. And that was when the New England Center for Circus Arts, or NECCA, was born. We knew that we wanted to build a facility that was more robust than the mill building that we were working out of. And not having financial backing ourselves, we knew that we would have to, you know, become a not-for-profit in order to
get grants, right?
To get the grants. So at that point in time, Nimble Arts continued to be the vehicle with which we were performing ourselves, and we were doing our teacher trainings, but all of the other education stuff went over to NECCA. And, you know, I guess 15, almost 20 years ago, that split, it still exists.
You know, what is amazing and awesome is that you brought water to the desert over there, because it was a circus desert pretty much, right? And I see that happening now all over the world a bit, that people are not just, that people like you know, are not just going to the San Franciscos. They're going to other places, and people are so hungry for it. I mean, you experience that all the time, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, if we go back into the history of sort of circus education, which I find really fascinating, that there were in the 1980s, there were lots of different ways or not lots of different ways. There were a couple different ways that people could get into circus. So yeah, in the 1980s, the circus was starting to leave traditional families and traditional touring venues, and it was starting to come into places where people could access it. So there were the Sailor Circus in Sarasota, where kids would be able to take classes if they were enrolled in the public school. There were social circus communities, which is basically where people were teaching mostly ground skills, but to, kids who are at risk, like after school programs and things like that. And then circus also became part of risk recreation, which is where like Club Med had a flying trapeze that you could fly on, or you could, just different ways that you could try circus, but it was this more publicly accessible sort of risk, like people were bungee jumping and people were summiting mountains and doing those things. That was what was really big in the 80s. And then by the early 90s and 2000s, circus started to go into some of the pole dance studios, and people started to make their sort of boutique studios that they're the aerial studios that we know today. So circus schools, the San Francisco, which is where my sister and I were both administrators of the circus school in San Francisco, that school started through the Pickle Family Circus. And then we had a couple other places that you could go to train, but it was basically overseas or in Canada that you had to go to get an official circus education. And you had to speak French and all sorts of things like that. So it wasn't until the late 90s, I would say, that you could actually land at a school that had any element of professional training in the United States. Before then, it was a lot of more casual type training.
It makes me think of the growth that has happened in our industry in the last 10 years, 5 years even, because of the internet and studios opening up everywhere. What is your perspective on this growth? And as an industry leader, how can we facilitate it, guide it, all those things?
I feel like I'm going to answer that with two different hats. The first is that there's not a lot of circus studios that are opening. There's a lot of aerial studios. And as someone who's embedded in the professional circus world, I notice that in a couple of years, we're going to have a problem in the United States where we have kids who've grown up with amazing aerial instruction, and they're going to Viva Fest and other competitions at young ages, and they can perform the heck out of their focus area. If they're fabric artists, they're amazing fabric artists, but they're really amazing aerialists. Sometimes they can dance, sometimes they have a little bit of tumbling. But we're not creating circus artists through that pathway. We're creating aerialists. At some point in time, those aerialists, if they want to be circus performers, they're going to need to go to circus school or somehow learn how to do a ground act or partnering or tumbling or dance that can support that aerial work. So that's one pathway that I'm sort of watching and wondering how that's going to shape the future.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree, because we are not really creating well-rounded circus performers. We're creating an aerialist, and sometimes they don't even want to touch another apparatus.
Exactly.
Like, they're not even close to being even an aerial generalist. She's doing a whole scene over here with her Barbies. It's a play. But it's really close to the microphone. Yeah, we are not creating that. I mean, I struggle with that because I am not a circus person. Like, I'm not actually a circus person, but I am training people quite well in a circus role. So, yeah, like, how do you square that circle exactly? You know, I do ask myself that question.
And how do we encourage people who are phenomenal aerialists at a young age to put aside that thing that they have a real passion for and buckle down and maybe learn something else so that they can actually have a career in circus, which is different than having a career in performance. And I think that there's a lot of people, who are going to perform the corporate gigs and maybe they dance and do aerials. Like, there's a lot of work out there for that. But I just like to identify that there's two different conversations happening. One is aerials and aerial studios, and those are taking off like gangbusters. And then there's actual circus, and there's not a lot of opportunity to train up in circus. You can go to NECCA. San Francisco has programs. SANCA has programs. There are a couple other programs out there, but they're still struggling to bring in people who are interested in learning circus, which is different than aerials.
Yeah, there's kind of a marketing thing there, huh? Is it a marketing thing for you? Like aerial silks is more marketable to like a regular mom or dad getting their kid in circus.
I think it's market. I think the other thing is, sometimes it comes down to finances and time. If you're going to be a really great aerialist and your parents are driving you to circus or aerial studio classes and paying for those classes, when you're 12, it's really hard to convince them to also take you to gymnastics class and also make sure you're getting a juggling class and also make sure you're learning how to do partner acro. So there's finances and time that are part of that. I find it really hard sometimes to convince a 12-year-old who loves aerials that they should also be spending a little bit of time doing handstands in their bedroom. It takes a particular, financial set and brain set to want to do those things. Whereas like if a kid really loves baseball, they just go to baseball and they just do baseball. Where circus is like so broad, it's hard to explain how to do that. And if they're not in a community that has broader circus, they're not seeing it. When they walk into their aerial studio, they're seeing someone on fabric, someone on lyra, maybe someone doing contortion and someone doing dance. But if they walk into a circus school, like if they walk into NECCA, they're watching people do those things, but they're also seeing someone do clowning, and they're watching someone doing rolla bola, and they're watching someone do tramp wall. And so they can imagine themselves doing those things as well. So I love the fact that there's aerial studios everywhere. And I love the fact that more and more people are taking teacher trainings to become better teachers, because that, up until about 10 years ago, there weren't a lot of models for that. So I started a program called the Leveling Up Aerial Teacher Symposium, which we call LATS. And it's a way, to take people who have been teaching and give them tools to teach more advanced skills to their students so that we can help these aerial studios take people through from the basics all the way through to the really advanced areas. I do see that continuing to flourish and love that that's flourishing. And in my heart, I also want to make sure we're supporting circus as a separate thing.
And what was the other hat that you said you had on?
I'm also part of the safety committee for the American Youth Circus Organization and the American Circus Educators Association. And I think what I was referring to is that while I love that there is so much circus and aerials out there, I think that there's also, I would love to point people back to places where they can learn more about rigging, learn more about studio management, learn more about this community that already exists. There's a lot of people who sort of pop up a studio because they've taken a couple of fabric classes. They're really passionate about it and they want to share that passion with other people, but they're not necessarily connecting back to the national industry of aerial and circus educators that have already done a lot of groundwork to make this a safe and a safe place for people to teach.
I think what can happen is across the states, across the world, you're in your small community, your teacher teaches you how to do a little silks. You get a job across the street at another place that just opened, like you're a couple years into your training and they offer you a job. I think that happens a lot.
Yeah.
It happens a lot. And you don't necessarily feel like you're in a national community. You feel like you're in a really small community and you had one teacher and now you're teaching these kids that you just met. Whereas for me, when I was in LA and I was in a dance community, it did feel like it was very cohesive. You were part of a group of hundreds, if not thousands of people. I feel like with circus, unless you are, I don't know, like more common than not, it's the opposite, where you just learn a little bit. You get a job because there's a need somewhere. And then you kind of just learn as you go. And then how do we draw those people into the national spectrum of it? Like, how do we draw those people into caring about the foundation that has been laid to knowing not just your circus history, but dance history and just like the history of like the stable parts of our community that are very stable, like ACE and, all these things. What is your perspective on that? Because I don't really have an answer for that myself yet. Like I think about it sometimes.
Yeah, I think the only answer that I've really come up is that those of us who are aware of this need to talk more freely about it. And it's paying homage to our ancestors and to the structures that exist. So in a way, when I go to teach a workshop, I will say things like, we're going to learn the Rebecca split. Who knows who Rebecca is? And commonly people will say, oh, we think it's Rebecca Leach. Well, it's actually not Rebecca Leach. It's named after Rebecca Leonard. And then I will tell the story of Rebecca Leonard, who's American.
Oh my God, please tell that story here. I don't know that story.
Rebecca Leonard is an American who works in Toronto, and she, did a move and people just started calling it the Rebecca split. She never called it the Rebecca split, which is another thing about naming protocols. Is a lot of times the person who it's named after didn't name it. But if I'm in the middle of teaching something, I always try to stop and reference the elders and the pathways with which something got named. The Georgia split, for example, the pathway that got named was me teaching at Canopy Studio in Georgia.
I didn't know that.
Something. Yeah.
Wait, so Georgia Twist?
The Georgia Twist. Yeah. There's a Georgia.
No
the Georgia
effing
Twist.
way. I'm staring at the Georgia Twist person right now. I had no idea.
Oh, no, I didn't make it. I witnessed it. And then someone said, I made up this trick and I can't figure out how to teach it. It's a very tricky weight shift. So they knew how to do it, but they were trying to figure out how to teach it to the rest of the ensemble. So I was an outside person helping them figure that out. Then I used that sequence and taught it somewhere else. I didn't name it at that point, but I told the story of how I was inspired by this moment in Georgia. 6 months later, someone came back to me and said, oh, I'm learning the Georgia Twist. It got named.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So a lot of tricks, Anyway, if we can talk about this history and how rich and how inspired we are and how there's elders out there who have these stories, then we can remind people in every teaching moment that they're part of a much bigger community and a bigger world. Whereas if I go in to teach a workshop and I'm like, I'm going to teach you my sequence, then they're not connecting into this external, national, international world through that process.
Oh my God, I love that. I'm going to tell the story that I heard through you about it every time I teach Georgia Twist. And it's a tough one to teach.
There's the Emma sit as well, which is part of that whole weird ways of getting into crossback straddles. And Emma was a student in one of my classes, and I had 5 minutes left at the end of a class. And I said, why don't you guys all put footlocks on and just fuss around and see if you can find anything. And Emma came up with this sequence. And then later on, we realized that you could build it into a crossback straddle. But that's how Emma Sit was built.
Okay, I'd never heard that one. And is it just like a chair into a straddleback?
The Emma Sit starts from a split roll up. And you do half the split roll up and then cross your ankles on the fabric and then roll over to like this weird chair.
Oh, people call that also pinup.
Yes.
Have you heard that
there's a little
terminology?
A little moment where you kind of,
have a little pinup moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think if as educators, we can use that pathway to just express a bigger world. And then I think the other thing is, and I do this partly because I'm on the safety committee at ICO and ACE, and I've been with them for a very long time, is that I try to be constantly telling people that there's other places that they can go to level up as teachers through their educators conference, which happens biannually, or through their youth gathering, which also happens biannually. And whatever other ways we can share with people, whether it's, going to Viva Fest, for example, I like to suggest that people go to Viva Fest versus some of the aerial competitions. Again, because I focus on circus and I want people to see circus. Viva Fest has a tent. They're a circus community. So I try to point in all these different external directions to the bigger national world of circus.
The other thing that I see a lot is the studios that are doing things really legit and making sure that they are connected to all these things that we're talking about, and that they're working really hard to get better at what they're doing rather than all the other stuff that happens all the time. Like, okay, you're just building a program and you're just training a bunch of teachers. And if one doesn't work out, you just pull another student from class that's the next in line.
Yeah.
That can be so problematic. It doesn't have to be problematic. And I know that a lot of these, we talked about aerial deserts, like there's a lot of spaces in the United States where you just don't have any other choices. But, for studio owners out there to do their homework so that their teachers know that they're not just teaching stuff kind of badly and like without connection to anything else. I mean, we have the internet now, so you can actually feel that connection and not even leave your house.
Yeah. And
which I kind of like.
Yeah. If as a studio, if you can commit to the training of your staff through teacher trainings. Nimble Arts has a teacher training. Our focus is on skill progressions and spotting. Some of our ProTrack program graduates started their own training. So Paper Doll Militia with Sarah and I didn't know that connection either. Sarah and Rain. Yeah. So Rain did our professional training program. They have an excellent online teacher training. So I feel like there's like no excuse for anybody to be out there teaching aerials without some kind of training, because there's so many really great opportunities for people to do teacher trainings. The other thing for studio owners, and again, because I'm on the safety committee, I'll talk about this, is at ACE, there's actually a safety program that you can participate in. And you basically get a stamp at the end of the process that says your studio is an approved studio through the ACE program. And you can put that on your website. And if we can educate the incoming students to look for that approval, then they know that they're walking into a studio where the rigging is safe, where there are progressions and processes for the teachers to be trained, that there's logs that show that the equipment has been inspected. if we can get the studio owners to be part of that sort of a thing, then we can help the clients pick studios based on those parameters instead of just, whatever moved into the studio next door.
Right. We, as in me, I'm the only person here. I interviewed Elena Brocade.
Yes.
Just recently. So we really got in the weeds when it came to that, what you're talking about. But I love this also because I do think that is kind of our jobs as leaders in the community, you way longer than me, to just keep on bringing focus to this stuff so the people who don't know about it, it's not because they don't care. They don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know yet. And they just need to be told, educated.
Exactly.
Whatever.
It's more that because this is such a new industry,
yes,
people don't realize that there is even a national organization that cares about safety in circus. Or there's a national organization that kids can get involved in the bigger world of circus arts through ICO, the American Youth Circus Organization. Gymnastics, wrestling, like all these other places have hundreds of years of federations supporting them and creating community. So we have to be a little bit more diligent to create it ourselves.
Yeah, and to elevate it all while it grows so fast.
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of like the struggle to catch up with the growth that's already occurred in the last 10 years. Like, it's insane how much it's grown. Serenity, can you talk a little bit about I just called you your sister's name?
That's
so crazy.
okay.
I've talked to her in 2 years. Do people do that?
Yes. Yeah. I find it's especially visual people for whom they look at the face and it seems similar. And
I know, but we don't know each other I don't know your sister that is insane that just happened. Elsie, can you talk about your pro track and, just give us a 101 on it and what it takes. And if there's people out there who are interested, what's the time commitment? Mm-hmm. What's the financial commitment, to kind of do that so they don't necessarily have to go look it up elsewhere?
Yeah. So the program was originally a part-time 1-year program. So it was 3 days a week for 9 months. And people were so excited and interested about it that it became a 2-year program and then a 3-year program. And now it is a full-time 3-year training program.
Wow. Okay.
But it grew because people saw that was what the industry required in order for you to get the kind of training you needed to go out and do the jobs that people want. And of course, so many people come to us and they say, I want to work for Cirque du Soleil. Yes, our graduates work for Cirque du Soleil, but there's so much more opportunity out there for work. Our graduates are doing all of it. They are winning burlesque competitions. They are performing on the street in street fairs in Europe and for AIDA and for Seven Fingers and Cirque du Soleil. So the program is designed for people to graduate with 2 acts, because that's what the American and European industry really requires, is that you have 2 different acts that you can hold the stage with. And they also graduate with having a circus performing tour under their belt that they do at the end of their 3rd year. And they have all of their promotional materials. So they graduate with a website, videos, and they've already been made connecting with producers and auditioners. So they basically walk out into the world with contracts, most of them. The program is 3 years and you audition. We're actually doing live auditions in March. So applications are usually accepted through January. Folks get invited to a March live audition, although not everybody has to come, but we get to know you better if you can come to the live audition. Once you've been accepted, you're accepted with a major focus. So we might have someone who has a major in hand balancing or a major in trampoline wall or a major in trapeze. By the end of your 1st year, you will also pick your minor. The reason why we give people a whole year to pick their minor is because we do have so many people who come from studios where they don't have the breadth of opportunity to try steer wheel, or they might not have a partner, so they don't know that they love partner acrobatics. Going into the second year, they now have a major and a minor, and they're working on those acts and doing performances in those acts. And then, as I said, for year 3, they actually go on tour and they have a show that's created by a director. So they graduate with all of this experience under their belt.
And is this tour something you guys produce and your students are in it and you guys tour it every year? Because it's a different amount of people, like different people who are all in their third year.
Yeah. So basically your graduate thesis ends up being you and the other people in your year put together a show. They usually start in February, so they're actually doing it this week. And they come back and they do another week in April. And then for 3 to 4 weeks at the end of the program, so April and May, they tour New England. So they're learning how to go into a theater, rig a theater, adjust the show for the specs of the stage, travel to another space, make the adjustments all over again. And they're getting so much experience that when they are hired, they already have that experience under their belt.
So this is basically college for circus people.
We call it trade school, which is basically college for people who aren't doing an academic track. So it's a 3-year trade school. And we have, we're actually partner with the Vermont Student Assistant Corporation, so that anybody who is a Vermont resident for over a year can actually apply for financial aid through their trade school financial aid program. So we're sort of recognized in the state of Vermont as an official trade school.
And how long has that program been in existence?
The 3-year professional training program has been in existence since 2017, which is when we moved into our new facility. So we have a custom built circus space that has 40-foot ceilings. It has an in-ground trampoline, foam pit, all the things that you need to sort of train at that higher professional level. One of the things that we see from folks who come from studios that have lower ceilings is they are limited in what they're learning. So our facility was designed to really let people try pretty much any kind of circus they want to try.
Okay, and when you are accepting your students, what are you looking for?
That's a great question. We sort of divide what we're looking for into a couple different categories. We're obviously looking for some initial level of mastery in an area of circus arts. So you might have some level of mastery on trapeze, some level of mastery in juggling, some level of mastery in tramp wall. We're also looking for some layers of other skill, interest, and capacity. So maybe you're a trapezist, but you can also dance and you've got a tumbling run under your belt. Or you're a juggler, but you're also working on contortion. Then we're also looking at people's performative quality. And so for some people, that's actual performance experience. For other people, we'll be putting you through like physical theater and movement classes in the audition. And we're looking for some excitement and appreciation for being a performer on stage, not just a technician.
So you and I talked earlier just now about not necessarily being the person that stands out at the very beginning. And I was very lucky to have people that saw enough potential or just was like, oh, just let her try to get me, to give me my time to spread my wings. Now, as an educator, how do you see that potential? Like, how would you advise other educators, other people who are studio owners, who are maybe auditioning people for their pre-professional programs? How do you recognize that potential? Like, how would you advise somebody like me or somebody who's owning a studio that's putting together their show to give the spots to the people who are not the most obvious. I think about that all the time.
Yeah, I think my brain is going a couple different directions, and I'm going to sort of do philosophical and then technical. The philosophical part of it, and this is the sort of the mission for Nimble Arts, the teacher trainings and stuff that Serenity and I do, is we teach the heart first and we teach the body second. So you might have someone who is incredibly talented, who just wants to come in and play, or isn't really excited about it. I'm going to work with what their heart is giving me, not what their body is giving me. I'm not going to push them just because they have perfect lines and they're stronger than everybody else in the class. The person who comes to me and their heart is, I am passionate about this. I will be the first person who comes into class. I'm going to do the homework that you give me. Their heart is telling me that they want this, and then I can help them figure out how to get their body to do the thing that they want to do. So I recognize for myself that I'm working with both a heart and a body as I'm working with what people want to do with circus in their lives. On a professional level, I think it's really important for us as teachers, if we have a student whose heart says, I really, really want this, that we don't let them skip the holes and only work on the things that they're good at, which is really hard, especially when I see like a youth performance troupe where you might have someone who's really bendy and looks really great on the hoop, for example. And you're constantly putting them into the hoop group because they're going to star in the show and they're going to look good and they're going to make your program look good. But they can't do a forward fold to save their life. They're only bendy in their back, and they can't jump, and they refuse to do partner acrobatics or juggle. That's a classic example of someone that I'm going to say, your heart really, really, really wants to be a professional circus artist, and I need to help you fill in the holes. So yeah, you're going to still do hoop because that's what makes you feel really great. But let's make sure you're doing hand balancing and that you're doing juggling. And you might hate it or not like it as much as the other things. But if you want to be a professional, we're going to need to fill in the gaps. And that takes a particular strength from the teacher to have a conversation with the student so that you're not constantly butting heads, that you've agreed that that is where the student wants to go. And you as a studio owner, make sure you leave space for the student to do that instead of constantly putting them in the place where you're only shining a light on what they do really, really well. So I know that's kind of a complicated answer, but I think in short, it's like making sure we look at what the gaps are and that we're helping people fill in the gaps, not just focusing on what they do really well. So when people come to the professional training program at NECCA, the first year, we have really honest conversations with people that you're at circus school and you're going to do your major so awesomely. You're going to get to do, if tramp wall is your major, you're going to do tramp wall like you've never done tramp wall before. But we're also going to be pushing you to learn and fill the holes. And that's going to be frustrating because you're going to be working on the things that you're not as good at. But by the time you get into your second year, you'll have filled in those gaps, and then there's no stopping you.
That's a whole skill set, I feel like, with people in general, but artists, like, to be okay enough with not being good at something. What have you seen with that?
That's a really good question. I think the places that I've seen the struggle the most are people who are really good at academics, who maybe have done some college. And I was one of those people, I was all about the academics. But being really good at things with your brain is really different than being good at things with your body. Your body cannot pull an all-nighter. Your body cannot skip 3 weeks of classes and then come in and do the show, the way that your brain might be able to skip 3 weeks of classes and then you can sit for the final and still pass. So I have a lot of people who struggle with pacing their physical training when their background is in academic training or academic learning.
They get frustrated that their body's not keeping up with them, or it doesn't retain the same way.
They get frustrated that they can't just cram it all, that they can't, you can't get sick for 3 weeks and miss classes and expect to still be able to do the show. Your body needs the layering and the care of the physical information that's different than how your brain can work. So there's a lot of sort of re-evaluating how learning is done when people are high academic achievers and then they move into a physical achievement realm.
Okay, slightly different question, but of the same topic. What do you tell students? I just heard this 3 times yesterday. What do you tell students when they say, Coach Carrie, I'm a visual learner?
Well, that's an interesting thing. We have so many tools now that we didn't have back when I started. There was no internet. There was that one bootleg video that got passed around that was a couple of acts that we could look at. But we just kind of had to do it. So as teachers and as students, there's almost like too much visual access out there. So I think we've become used to, I'm just going to pop up that thing I saw on Instagram and I'm going to look at it a million times. Yes. And then that becomes an expectation, which is like part of a whole other conversation, that my teacher is physically capable of demonstrating that for me.
As many times as I need her to, so I can understand what I'm about to do, and that's her job. Whereas as dance, I mean, I don't know if you agree with all that, but that's what my experience is. With dance, as a dancer who's danced my whole life, after a certain point, teacher says, rond de jambe, blah, 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 and I got it.
Yeah.
I know what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to instill that in my students, and they're very resistant. I believe they're very resistant. That's my standard.
I think there's also like this interesting culture that if my teacher can't do it and they're not famous on Instagram for doing it, they're not a good teacher. Whereas those of us who've gone through our physical careers, I've been teaching for so long, I like to think that I'm a very good teacher, but I can't demonstrate that. And so there's a culture of helping our students understand that that doing it and being famous for doing it on the social media doesn't mean they're a good teacher. I'm sort of digressing from your initial question, but that's like something that I struggle with, that a lot of teachers aren't getting hired to teach at festivals, for example, because they're not Instagram famous. To your question about people who insist that they're visual learners, one of the things that we do in our teacher training is we try to have multiple pathways that we can give students material to learn. So ground school work, so that they can get stuff into their body, is something that I do a lot with my students. And if they insist that the only way that they can get information is visual, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to, within a class structure, like you give them another student to watch. But I think encouraging them to feel things is something that has been a big part of my repertoire as a teacher, that every time someone does something, I ask them to assess, how did that go for you? What did you feel in your legs? what did you do differently than you did the last time? So I'm encouraging them to build a practice of self-assessment. And that's really important for me as an educator of pre-professional folks, because I'm teaching them how to become independent learners when they're off on tour as professionals. But I think that quality of self-reflection, of feeling your body and self-assessing what happened inside the body, is a tool that we can start even earlier, so that people aren't always looking for external stimulus or the external visual stimulus to figure out what's happening in their skill.
Well, it's also at least for me, the difference between imitation and being able to take direction.
Yeah.
Which for an artist, if you're a performer, you absolutely need that skill, and it takes more of the brain work than regurgitation of something visual. Are you okay, Bean? When I talk about it, look, I have a magic wand now. When I talk about it in class, there are gymnastics teachers who are 80 years old. They haven't done the thing in 60 years. They're still the most qualified to do that job. And so I think that's part of my job too, as a person who is still, I've chosen not to be taking gigs right now. I have a kid. I'm leaning into being a teacher, but I'm still in those years where I'm able to teach it and do it. But that's not going to be the case forever. And I'm still going to do my job. And to kind of have that within like the fibers of our industry, that the best teacher might be sitting on the chair next to the student talking and not demonstrating one thing. And it also, it creates this skill set in the student that is immeasurable for them to be able to take direction like that.
Well, I think it also brings into play the language with which we use to teach.
Yes.
And that's something that Serenity and I dove into really early on. I was inspired by Laban. Do you know Laban? It's a dance theory.
Is it a show, or is it like a theory of movement?
It's a whole package, and I'm probably going to totally butcher it, but there's a part of Laban that talks about how it gives you language with which to express movement qualities. So, for example, if you're trying to express the difference between a sharp gesture and a fluid gesture, or something that is direct or indirect as a pathway, there's a lot of language that Laban has created to describe how dance is. And it was created before we had video. So it was a way for someone to take a Balanchine dance, and there was actually like choreographic graphics that you could show how the steps were made. And then there was language to describe the quality with which the steps were made. I was introduced to it by Susan Murphy, who started Canopy Studio and does these wonderful workshops about qualities of movement. And I thought, how do I take that into specifically aerial fabric so that I can express what is actually happening when someone does the skill set or the choreography on aerial fabric? Back when I started teaching aerial fabric 20 plus years ago, we were teaching the Peter sequence and the Ramon sequence. And it was multiple skills and processes wrapped into a whole choreography. So the analogy that I like to think of is we were being taught how to memorize the Gettysburg Address, but we weren't being taught what the words actually meant inside the Gettysburg Address. And so you might learn the Gettysburg Address sequence, or the Pledge of Allegiance sequence, or the prayer, Serenity Prayer sequence, but we didn't have words for what was happening within that. And so Serenity and I started to come up with the words that help us to create those larger sequences. So language like flamenco hand, figure 8 foot wrap, dancer foot wrap, crucifix, reverse or regular. These are things that a lot of people use in the language now to explain you're going to put a reverse footlock on, and then you're going to do a flamenco hand, and you're going to do a half turn, and then that's this skill. If we have more clear language when we're working with our students, we're not asking them to memorize the Gettysburg Address. We're telling them this is what the is, and this is what is, and this is what this word is. And now you can either memorize the Gettysburg Address, but you know what the pieces are, or you can make your own poetry because you know what the words are. I hope that made some sense.
No, it's an amazing way to articulate what we try to do when we put these sequences together, and they're, somebody's trying to teach somebody. I just tried to teach somebody a rotisserie into a teardrop. And it's for a performance. She's capable of it. But I said, I know you really are nervous about not having the sequence, but I wanted to teach you teardrop by itself. She's like, I'm not going to be performing that. I said, but if you don't know how to do it from the base, you're going to get confused in the rotation.
Yeah.
You're not going to know where you are and why you have one side that's super long and one side that's short. We need that length. And so you articulated that so well. Elsie, I feel like I could talk to you for hours. I'm not going to, though. Relax. And I get to meet you in person, and I get to, I hopefully. And I'm so excited because I'm going to NECCA at the end of September. But if you have any advice for studio owners or teachers out there, what would it be? I know we talked about a lot of things.
I think just reflecting back on what we talked about in this particular conversation is becoming part of the larger world of circus arts or aerial education, whatever your focus is, and going out and meeting other teachers, meeting other studio owners, go to teacher trainings, invite a bunch of people to your studio. We're doing something in Portland, Oregon in June, which is a West Coast version of the Leveling Up Aerial Teacher Symposium that I'm doing this week in Brattleboro. And there's also a teacher training. And part of that is this hope that we're going to get all these people from that region to come together and to sit in a room together and learn and share. And if we can have the elders in the community leveling up the newbies in the community, we're all going to rise up and be better.
Oh my God. We got to have you back. This is great.
No.
Not today. She's so hungry. We haven't eaten breakfast yet.
Yes.
Okay, here, you want to say goodbye?
I'd be happy to come back.
Yeah, I want you back. Here, okay.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for giving me your mom for a little while.
My listeners, if you would honor me with a 5-star rating and review, I would appreciate it forever. It is the hardest thing about being a podcaster is to get your podcast out to the people who want to listen. So the best way to do that is to have a good star rating and just ride that algorithm. So I really appreciate if you guys would just open the Apple app and leave me a review. It makes such a difference. I appreciate you. I also have Greener Grass with Digitant Podcasts with my friend Kelly McVeigh. If you want to hear my voice twice a week, it's there for you. It's light, it's heartfelt, and we bring on some really amazing guests. All right, my friends, over and out. This is Carrie from Wrap Your Head Around Silks. This is The Expecting Aerialist.